This episode of Future Construct is supported by Applied Software. We would like to thank them so much for supporting us. Applied Software is really on a mission to transform industries. They empower their clients and champion innovation with real-world expert consultants. So to reach them, you go to asti.com, that's ASTI.com, and please tell them that we at Future Construct and BIM Designs sent you. Thanks so much. Hi, welcome. I'm Amy Peck, your host for Future Construct. And today we have a very good friend of mine, Damon Hernandez, who is not only feeling particularly festive today, but is the co-founder and director of technology at Idea Builder, founder and executive director at AEC Hackathon, was also a product manager at Samsung Research for many years, and just kind of all around great guy. Hi, Damon.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for having me.
How are you?
Doing well. Thank you.
Good, good. So let's dive right in. We've known each other for a while. You have tremendous expertise in the XR space in general, but also in the space that we talk a lot about here at Future Construct, around BIM and around construction and AEC and optimizing workflows. And so I'd love to talk about maybe some of the projects that you're working on.
Yeah. So thank you again for having me. And the projects I work on mainly are around how do we use 3D data that's generated ideally from the manufacturers and the fabricators further down the construction process, and how does that data continue to have value to all the different stakeholders. So very much following the BIM process, and got involved with that back in about 2007, working with a timber fabrication company based out of the Pacific Northwest. So at a very high level, that's kind of what it is how do we take that data and again, reuse it, not just in interactive 3D for mobile and tablet, but also for VR and AR. When I got into Web 3D back in 2000 with Thermal and then X3D, that was kind of the goal, was more around 3D data, and then what were the standards for that, and then also looking at just the built environment. So I'd have to say that this year would be 20 years where it was looking at how do we kind of take as a gross oversimplification, but kind of Google Earth and PS5 now, and kind of smash them together and deliver it all on www.
Excellent. And so, when you started, it was quite early in terms of, especially around VR and the tools available, and certainly the hardware wasn't there yet. And now this evolution has occurred, and we actually do have headsets that are wearable. The fidelity is good. We can actually have a reasonably high number of polygons in our environments. And so, how has that changed the way that you're sort of looking at the technology and kind of bringing it into these workflows now that the hardware is really here? And now, of course, the network infrastructure is almost here to really support it.
Yeah, well, definitely, the network infrastructure is the key thing. What's exciting for me is that it's just becoming something that's the norm, right? If we see a lot of these solutions now, a lot of folks are rendering 3D data for construction or others, right, in web pages. So Web 3D is just kind of that, it's here, it's not going anywhere. And so what's nice about the technology now is that it is ubiquitous, and more folks see the need to kind of have this form of communication. And then seeing the way that the web is evolving to include things like VR and AR through the WebXR device API and the great work that the Immersive Web Working Group is doing. So it's very exciting times from that. I think where I know I fell short in my being excited about 3D online were just around all the permissions around security and other things that are important. And so that's kind of the next step of where I'd like to see the hardware and more of the software go. It's just trying to make sure that not just for construction, but for the built environment professions and medical and all these others, is looking at more around security of the data that we're accessing in these types of environments. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's an important point. And I think, as we also start to think about how we're going to be wiring smart buildings into smart cities, I think then that access and those controls become much more important. Have you seen solutions that are out there, or who's responsible for that? Is that, a network protocol? Is that standards bodies?
Well, I think it's a combination of different folks kind of trying to identify what are the best practices, right? And so with that, part of it is, the onus is on the application developer, and that's what's exciting, right? There are more things out there that the web gives us the ability to do than game engines for a lot of needs that exist currently. Now, where it's a little bit different is that a lot of the VR and AR that we see are being done in the game engines and not necessarily with the web, and so developers there are a little bit tied to the limitations of the tools that they're using. So I hope that as the game engines support more of web technologies and then more web developers start using VR and AR and looking at that hopefully we'll get there sooner than later. But it is important, right? I mean, if for the built environment, if I'm, again, looking at a nuclear power plant, or if I'm pulling in, a federal building or a bank or something like that, right? What is that environment that I'm bringing it into? What is the biometric authentication, right, that can be used to authenticate the user? And so these are just some of the things that currently I'm trying to focus on is how do we have these kind of secure XR experiences that are mobile first?
And you also, so let's talk a little bit about the hackathon as well. Just because I think that on the one hand, hackathons that I've been involved in, I never even knew that, someone like me, I'm not a coder, but I understand the business application. It never occurred to me to be part of a hackathon. And then I was at a company actually called Leap Motion where we all had to be part of the hackathons. And I actually realized that, okay, actually I'm not completely useless here. Like I can steer this project. And so I'd love to actually talk about that and also inspire people who may have different types of experience, not to be afraid of being involved in hackathons. So I'd love to just hear your experience there.
Yeah. So just real quick. So the hackathon you're talking about is the AEC Architecture, Engineering, Construction Hackathon that we kicked off well, it's 2013. It was November 2013. And so I think now we just concluded our 45th event in a variety of different countries around the world. And so what was exciting about that is the goal was to bring technologists together with people from industry to solve the Monday through Friday problem. And so where that's a little different than the hackathons I'd go to as a tech person is that you did have people that didn't know about tech at all, right? But in one way, that's the most important, right? We see this in Silicon Valley a lot where tech's made for tech's sake, and then someone stops and says, hey, did you ever talk to the person that you built that for? And this kind of solves that problem, right? Is it empowers back the person who's boots on the ground, and they have an idea for an app. And usually we even state, what's your proficiency level with technology? Are you an expert? All the way down to, I think I can find the power button. And so with that said, I highly encourage people from industry to participate. And now there are other hackathons. We kind of kicked off something that there's a few great ones. Thornton Tomasetti has a great hackathon to participate in, as his digital built environment group, and then I think the group here as well. So I would highly encourage for folks from the industry to go and participate, because it is that you know what the solutions need to be, right? You know what the problems are. So even if you don't code, you're way more valuable than you think you are, at least at these events.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson, because I would like to encourage business people to be more involved in hackathons. I think it's really important. So what are some of the interesting solutions that you've seen over the years, that came out of the hackathon that maybe even became full-blown products?
Yeah, well, we've had a few companies that have come out, which is kind of cool. Builderbox.io is one, and then some in the international markets. But it's really about tools, right? That's what's been interesting to see, is what do people come and what do they build? And a lot of times they're just trying to build tools for internal processes. So for example, if we were to go 2D and flat, and I think the URL is still up, but there was this one by a group of guys, Rogers O'Brien Construction there in Texas, they were trying to find, essentially subcontractors that they enjoyed working on, and how do they rate their crew. So they made a Tinder-like app where you could left swipe or right swipe on the performance of the person, and then have, it was called Rate My Subs. And then you have things where like tracking lost tools on a job site. And then sometimes in simple solutions. One guy came and found, just a group of developers where all they did was build a very simple program that looked to see when the computer was hung on Revit. So that way, if they were loading these large models that took 8 to 10 to 15 minutes, well, is the computer actually loading the model, or is it hung? And if it were hung, then it would send, something out to IT to update the machine. And even the developer said, hey, it took us an hour to build this. But the business model for the guy was, hey, we try to load one of these models 3 or 4 times. That's almost an hour. And when he did the math and calculated it out, he was going to save just his team roughly around 10 grand of yearly, and then run that across these different teams across his organization. So that's what's really neat, is that you get sometimes these super simple hacks, or you'll get things all the way to extreme, to where a guy came at Austin when we were there hacking in City Hall, and he was in insurance. They insured buildings. And so they were looking at, how do we take the BIM models and then bring them into an interactive 3D environment that also communicated with the HoloLens to do airflow analysis and see how we were beating up these buildings for insurance simulation. So it's really, it runs the whole spectrum: concrete estimation, all the way to, how do you get kids into construction? So yeah,
I think that's great. Yeah, and I think the optimization of workflows as well is really important. I would like to thank the team at Applied Software for supporting this episode of the Future Construct podcast. With solutions for really any modern project, Applied Software is on a mission to transform industries by empowering their clients and being the champions of innovation with real-world expert consultants. They have a comprehensive array of solutions for AEC, MEP, and manufacturing, with a singular focus: helping you achieve higher performance. So with software, training, support, consulting, and custom development, Applied Software has you covered for all of your workflow needs. And BIM Designs is proud to be a client and partner of Applied Software. So you can reach them at asti.com, it's ASTI.com, and please let them know that we here at Future Construct and BIM Designs sent you. So do you have a favorite? Do you have something that somebody built that you
Ooh, what's your favorite child?
I know, it's hard to say, or a couple. Without getting anybody upset.
well, I don't think I do. I just have to say that, well, I take that back. I think one that sticks out more than any other is, we've been very process and utility focused, go figure. But at Copenhagen last year, there was a young lady who came, and she took built environment related data, because that's kind of the guidelines, is that, it has to be a built environment focused solution. And hers was pretty awesome. She took the data from cities that they generated on crime statistics, and then wanted to, as a woman, and then in India, where she was from, wanted to plot what is the safest, not the fastest, route from point A to point B. Now that was awesome, because I think it brought back into just the need for, it starts with the humans first, right? And so that was kind of neat. So now we have the best hack for humans using built environment related data that's there. So all of them are great, but I think that one was really great, because as I've seen in all the different countries that I'm able to go to, it is kind of interesting to see where, like in Copenhagen and some of these other international markets, all the solutions really start with the person first and not the problem, which is different. So I'd have to say, if I had one that kind of stood out, it might be that one.
I love that. Well, actually, so I'm in the process, I'm here now in Austin, Texas, and I'm relocating the company here, and I'm doing exactly that. So I think I need to get her number so I can find out, like, okay, where should I base the office? Where should everyone live?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great use case.
Yeah.
And so, how do people get involved? What's the best way to find you and sign up, and when's the next one?
Well, AECHackathon.com is the best way to find out, the past events and things like that. And then, with the next one, with COVID, it's kind of tough to say. The next one planned is Zurich, but it will probably be all online. So right now with the pandemic, we're just trying to wait until we really say what will be the physical locations. But they did just wrap one up in Shanghai. So looking forward to some of the material coming out of that one.
That's great. So let's kind of shift back to maybe some of the specific projects. I don't know how much you can share about what you're working on now, but even if there's some sort of, some overarching high level, just some of the work that you're doing and you're focused on right now.
Yeah. Well, at the day job, it is looking at essentially just, again, how do we give superpowers to residential home builders? I think that's the key thing, right? A lot of the innovations in technology we see are still for the big firms. But if you're just somebody who, the usual flow, I mean, I'm natively from Texas, and to be quite honest, Home Depot was your one-stop shop for your labor, your materials, like everything, right? And so how do you bring technology superpowers, digital fabrication, all of these things to those folks? So at a high level, that's what I'm working on. Application wise, I'm really exploring right now multi-device experiences, and this was something that I was able to really explore more at Samsung. Is that, right now we see a lot of interactive 3D on phone, and then there will be, what's that experience for a tablet, and then what's that experience in VR. Whereas a lot of what I'm exploring is I have an immersive experience. How does that look on the phone? How does that act differently if I sync my watch, if I sync an AR headset? And so how does the experience itself change depending upon the peripheral I'm adding to it, instead of how does my experience look differently across different peripherals? And so that's fun kind of exercise and design exploration. That's kind of neat, because that was what was fun about the, Samsung ecosystem, right? Is that, being on the web platform team there, the watch had a browser, the phone had a browser, the tablet had a browser, the VR headsets had a browser, the televisions had a browser. And so, how could you work with applications where maybe you can flick it from your phone to the TV, use your watch bevel to change, features and things like that. So that's just some of the kind of the fun type things I'm working on currently.
So, and that's one of the big challenges as well, because we have wearables, they're coming. I mean, they've been rumored now for quite a while, but we know they're coming at some point. And, Facebook has been, touting their deal with Luxottica, so they may actually look like magic wayfarers. How much will that change the way that we think about these sort of 3D overlays, especially around BIM? You really can have this kind of living, breathing BIM that lives, past the, through the built environment, wires into the smart cities, allows like things for continued maintenance or retrofitting. But there's, from what I've heard, there's such a, and you talked a little bit about this, yes, I can find the power button, to I'm an early adopter. How will that impact, and how long do you think it'll take before those boots on the ground start to feel comfortable with this level of technology?
Mm-mm. Well, I think if it helps you do your job better, you're going to get familiar with that technology before Friday. I think that's where we're at right now. Still a lot of the immersive technologies to the masses are, what are they good for? Beyond Snapchat filters and finding Pokemon and things like that. So if you can really drive that utility. Now, what's interesting to see in the built environment professions, right, is of course, communication. That's the number one. It really boils down to these tools help with communication, coordination and all of those things. And then, of course, the training component of it, right, which is huge, because right now we're having an issue with the trades, right? Trades have a bad stigma to them. It's one of those things, you go into a trade, if you can't get into college and you can't join the military, is kind of the thinking, right? And so we're in a new time. And so how can you use technology to be your Tony Stark plumber, right? right? Not your grandfather's plumber and these types of things. So I'm starting to see more of the adoption of it from like the unions, the trades, and things like that. And then also the generation is more tech friendly. So to answer your question, I think it's happening now, right? It is happening. It's just more of, I think a lot of the conversation in construction is around the individual's mindset, right? Even I'm guilty of saying, oh, we're such an antiquated industry. Oh, we're behind the fishing industry in the United States, um, but the reality of it is, no, there's lots of people innovating, right? There's been more implementation of VR and AR to stay than there has been in gaming. How many games have sold HoloLens units, right? How many games are helping move this technology the way that these enterprise industries have? And as you know, right, that's what we constantly hear. Entertainment isn't really moving the needle on these hardware sales as much as enterprise solutions are. So yeah, I think that it's that thing that we don't see, but it's totally happening. And I think, as I've mentioned before, but I love this. I was at a conference for AEC, and I saw more HoloLens and VR there than I did at GDC. And I remember asking one of the guys, I said, hey, why don't you come and talk to some of the AR VR groups? People would love to see how people are using this. And it would just, put some wind in some people's sails to see some fresh faces. And he said, hey, Damon, have you ever used a hammer? And I said, yes. And he said, how many hammer conventions have you gone to? And told him how awesome the hammer is. And you start doing that, I'll come to yours. And not the answer I wanted to hear, but a beautiful answer, right? Because I think that is what it is, right? Don't get excited about the tool, just use the tool. And if you're using the tool, then you're not really having time to go talk about it. But it is happening, so that's exciting to see.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I think because we spent so many years, all of us, and we're sort of a small industry now, so we do tend to know each other. And that's why I started calling us the second grade soccer team, because we would just travel around in a pack around the ball and go from conference to conference telling each other how amazing AR VR was. And so I think you and I both started going to more industry specific conferences because those are the people who needed to know about it.
Well, that's where the money is. True. High-fiving people that also, talk about how great the future is not going to pay the bills quite as good as talking to people who, see a tool and can implement it.
So, to your point, I do think that you're right on both counts that, in the AEC industry, there are some companies that are much slower to adopt, but then there are a lot of companies who are really innovating tremendously. I've even seen some companies, I've been amazed to hear some stories about even like Toll Brothers, and how they're leveraging the technology and how they're really starting to really wire together this end-to-end solution that starts from the design phase and getting approvals through key stakeholders all the way through to, consumer-facing sales process. But for the companies that are still kind of just dipping their big toe in or are just in this wait and see mode, what's some of the advice that you would give to them to get started in a way that feels manageable? Because I think it's more a fear factor and an expense factor, that they're concerned that it's just, it's like Pandora's box. Once you open it, then you're just, spending money on new technology.
Well, I think it's like anything. You have to identify, what am I using it for? Okay. To get VR for VR's sake, what a waste of money. But if you know that you're getting this because you're going to solve coordination problems, or you're getting this to solve these specific issues. So I think that would be the first place to start, and VR for construction is nothing new, right? There's an organization, I think it's called Construct VR, something like that, but a quick Google query will show you it's in its 20th year, and it's called like the event, conference for virtual reality and construction applications. So there's plenty of information out there as far as how can you use this, technologies to solve construction related problems. So I think that would be the first thing that I would say for those that are kind of dragging ass, to be quite honest, because it's different in different markets, right? And I'm seeing the adoption of, the conversations are much different. The hacks even are much different, right? Here in the States, we'll hear a hack where people are like, oh, well, let's use 3D to go into this type of environment and then display the information. Whereas, that same hack, if I heard it in like, say, Europe, let's use IFC to go into this other standards type thing then, and so the thoughts are further along. So I would say, one, look at what's happening across the pond, right? I mean, building is very localized, but I think a lot of us share a lot of the same problems, and there are ways that other people can figure it out. And that excuse of like, oh, well, they can do it there and we can't do it here this way, that's BS, right? It applies sometimes, but most of the time that's not the case. And so it is, to your point right now, we're at a cultural problem, not a technological problem. And so for those that don't feel comfortable with it, I think there's way more than enough data points out there to validate how to use it. And then if not, then just go within your own organization and then ask people and say, hey, how could looking at the 3D data add value to what you're doing? Because that's all VR and AR are the next step of that, right? I'm looking at the information. I don't fully understand it. Now I need to see it to scale, or I need to bring it here and look at it to really understand. So I would just say, yeah, look at all the different ways that it's being used.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, it's interesting that, AEC is an industry that is used to working in 3D, and yet we're used to kind of ingesting the data on 2D screens. And so it would seem a very logical progression to move into this 3D realm. And there are a lot of off-the-shelf solutions, and I can certainly name a few, but you probably know some that I don't. Are there some that are standouts for you that you could really just license a piece of software and get started?
Well, when it comes to interactive 3D, yeah, I think there are some, that are available out there for viewing. Again, it's a pretty standard thing, right? Upload your IFC or upload your Collada or GLTF and then spin it around. So there's a lot of different visualization things out there. And then as far as the VR viewers go, all of them out there are great. The only reason why I'm not going to name any is because the ones that I want to see are the ones that don't limit someone just to AR or VR, right? What is hey, I'm on my mobile phone. How can I have my interactions and our design coordinations while you're in VR? I'm on the phone and things like that. And so if there are those types of applications that are really about, again, cross-device experience, then those are the ones I'd like to know more about, so that way I can answer your question with specific company names.
Yeah, and I'd like to drill down into that more, because I really think that you are 100% right when you say this cross-device piece, and it's something that you really focused on in your career. Mm-hmm. How easy or difficult is it to kind of move these 3D assets from mobile environments to AR environments to 3D environments? And does it kind of start with this concept, like building a concept of a 3D asset library?
Well, you definitely need the asset library, right? So for example, like with us at Idea Builder, we were taking fabrication ready 3D components of wall panels and individual cut timbers, and then bringing that into a variety of different applications that were web-based mainly, and that started back in 2008. So, and that the whole goal there, right, is about, build once, display many. That was the great thing about Vermal and X3D. Is a language, is that you could build something, and then with a small amount of tweaking, it could now be AR, it could now be VR. It wasn't build a VR application, now build, and all the interactivity with the asset lived in the scene graph, right? And you were just defining different peripherals and then changing the UI and UX a little bit. So I think that right now, and again, my bias is web, that is the easiest, right? There's browsers across everything. And that gets around the issues of, downloading things, is it sending data? Is it collecting more data than it should for what it's doing? So I think with the web, there are solutions there, right, that are available. Again, it's just people doing their due diligence to look and see what's the right one.
So what's next for you? What are you excited about in the next, 3-5 years?
Well, I think what's exciting for the next 3 to 5 years is just to see the cost of everything continue to drop, right? The hardware is going to continue. I mean, Oculus is going to get cheaper. I mean, Facebook could give them away, right? It's not in their business model. And so I think that's going to happen. I think all of the real world issues are going to come in to play. So the things around security are going to be way more important. you know, accessing information and whatnot. I think the way that we see a lot of these other industries that relate with built environment data are going to be kind of just overlapping. I mean, you're hearing that now, right? More people from the AR cloud are talking about digital twins, and you know, like it's a new word for them, and but it's, you know, something's been around for a while. So, so that's what's kind of neat, right? Is that the real world is the stage for a lot of these immersive experiences, entertainment, built environment related or not. And so what I see is going to happen is that as the real world gets better at chronicling and digitizing these assets, that hopefully there's more communication about the proper and secure way to bring those assets into applications. The next thing I think will be great to see is how do people restrict what information is accessed, placed on their real world, right? And so I think that's the thing, is as the lines of the real and the digital blend more and past just the, again, catch a Pikachu kind of thing, we're going to see a lot more, I think, restrictions, a lot more concerns around privacy and security and things like that. So that's kind of exciting for me. And as far as the hardware goes, the hardware is going to continue to get better. It'll continue to get cheaper. But it's just more about the design thinking right now. That's what I'm trying to push for now, or who are the people that are designing for, you know, I'm on an experience on my phone. Now I've put on my AR glasses. How do I push that experience up, but still use my phone as a controller, still use the AR, you know, that kind of thing.
A lot of good things coming. And I'm hoping that, you know, in a year or two, anyone listening to this will hear this next question and it'll feel like a distant memory. But, you know, what do you think the impact has been with COVID and, you know, people now trying to stay connected? And in a lot of ways, it's fast-tracked a lot of these initiatives. What have you seen in some of the projects that you've worked on?
Well, I mean, the need for 3D, right, for remote, that's definitely a lot more reality capture, way more reality capture. So that's one of those things that I think COVID has changed. The need for communication, again, has changed. You know, seeing now that people are looking at things like spatial, you know, so that's what's fascinating, is when in the industry, folks that I know, they know what VR and AR is. I mean, a lot of folks in the industry do, but how many of them use it? But then when they're telling me about different collaboration platforms that they're trying out or that they own Oculi, it's, you know, that's that to me is exciting to see, right? Because it's mainstream. That's the main thing. It's like, you know, almost every architecture firm I know has one of these headsets, you know, small or big. And now it's just, I think, kind of getting it more to the people, again, on the day-to-day.
Yeah, I love that. So I asked this question of everyone. So project yourself, you know, 20, 30 years in the future, and you can create or have just any gadget to make your life better, easier on a personal level. What would it be and what would it do?
Yeah, I think I would just have an app that would collect work experience. You know, I think that's one of the issues that if I could build any application, I think that's what it would be. Not so much for myself, but right now, you know, I mean, we're seeing a huge vacuum. Again, this goes back to what I said earlier, a lot in the trades and others, right? We're about to lose, you know, big percentages of entire industries. And these people aren't passing their information along, right? And so if I could make any application, I think that would be the app that I would do, is, you know, how can we kind of, in a very user-friendly way, capture a lot of this, you know, decades of experience, and then have someone be able to go in and learn. That's great. Damon Hernandez, knowledge transfer device. Yeah, exactly. Coming to a headset near you. Exactly. Well, mobile first. Excellent. Well, Damon, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you for joining today. Thank you for having us. Yeah. Talk to you soon. All right. Thank you, Amy. Bye.